Great. So if you're in the chat here, if you're actually currently tuning in, it'd be great to actually just pop yourself in terms of leaving your name and even just like where you're tuning in from specifically, and just like shoot a really quick message in the chat. But after that, we can just get straight away in terms of getting started. Cool, cool, cool. Awesome, awesome. Love that. Brampton, Toronto. Okay, sick, sick. Cool. Love this. All right, I'm just gonna wait for another maybe like 10 seconds before anyone else that wants to joins up, but then we'll just be kicking it up straight away. Love that. Hey, Alex. Hey, Nusha. Hey, Awesome, awesome. Stouffville, Brampton. We love that. Sudbury. Cool. All right. Sounds good. I'm just going to kick things straight off, and thank you so much for actually tuning in and coming to this workshop. All right, so essentially the whole premise, as the intro has already been told, is that like you mentioned, that school is just inherently broken, and school is essentially very limiting in the fact that it takes a lot of time. It actually ends up sometimes not actually directly correlating with your own personal values, not values, but essentially your own personal growth and your own plans that you have in your mind. So essentially, the whole goal of this workshop and the premise is actually trying to create and craft your own sort of vision and pathway towards excelling and also reaching your future vision and dreams. Cool. So let's actually get this straight away started with a really quick intro about myself as well. So my name is Kevin, and I'm currently a 16-year-old innovator at the Knowledge Society and an aspiring modern-day polymath. Right. So essentially, in terms of a little bit more about myself and some of the other projects that I've sort of been able to work on over the past few months alone, I've been able to work on consulting projects with Instacart and the United Nations, and actually work on trying to solve huge problems that have been super valuable in terms of experiences. As well, I've been able to develop and build AI projects to raise sort of awareness about mental health, and also along with that, even just build a really cool breast cancer detection model, which has been a great experience as well. And then also recently, myself and a few other members at TKS also relaunched a really quick nuclear energy moonshot, which has been absolutely a valuable experience. And I think over the past few months alone, I've just grown so much, and I think it's all due to TKS. So if you want to check them out after this workshop, feel free to go ahead. But in terms of why I actually wanted to sort of set this up is the fact that I've realized there's been a common trend among myself and many of my friends. And it's the idea that after stumbling around for maybe 3 to 4 years in high school, I think it only finally clicks in your junior or senior year that maybe you've sort of been spreading yourself way too thin, or maybe you've just been actually working on a bunch of different things or drawing a bunch of different extracurriculars or clubs that don't actually align with what you care about, right? For example, like you might be joining your school's debate club or whatever Model UN Nation sort of club just for the fact of placing it on your resume, or even just like some of your other experiences that you are sort of only trying to actually join up for simply for the purpose of having it on your resume or as your past experience list, right? And that's great and all, but in terms of actually growing your knowledge base and growing your experiences and trying a bunch of different things, but in terms of actually connecting that with what you care about, it sort of, there's a disconnect, right? So essentially, I actually wanted to create this and actually sort of crack down on the sort of method. So essentially today, I'll be actually breaking down the Sipaki method, right? So in terms of the table of contents of today's workshop, so I actually really quickly kicked it off with workshop in terms of the introduction, and then also I actually wanted to run through a really quick vision and thought exercise. Then beyond that, actually break down the core method and core bulk of the presentation that I want to cover today, the Sipaki method. And then beyond that, actually give you some time to create your own sort of pathway and draft something up. And then also end off with a really nice call to action. All right, so now that we've all been sort of grounded, I actually want to sort of kick it off in terms of actually asking you to do a thought experiment, an exercise. All right, so essentially, I want you to set an intention, because if you actually are here and you've purposely tuned in to this specific section of the TO Hacks Hype Week, I'm sure that you all sort of had the vision in mind. You are interested because of the syllabus or the sort of workshop quick blurb that I put on, right? So set an intention on like what you exactly want to be getting out of this, right? Was it the idea of having like a really cohesive plan and action sort of pathway that you can sort of directly take upon and act on? Is it actually trying to figure out how you can become the next Elon Musk, the Steve Jobs, Ariana Huffington, Jennifer Doudna, like that, the actual legit people that are working on solving huge problems? Like just directly sit down and sort of think about that and sort of internalize that. All right, so I'll give like maybe like 10 more seconds to just like sort of internalize that and think about that. And just like really try to connect with sort of that core message that you're trying to set for yourself. But aside from that, I just like really want to get into it because I know we're short on time. So let's actually get to the very, very book without further ado, right? And essentially the CPACI method is actually something that I've devised essentially with a few of my friends and I that have all been working on solving some of the world's biggest problems, whether that be in the artificial intelligence space, whether that be through gene editing, blockchain, whether that be through software engineering, like many of you currently would be hacking on, also in like different areas in terms of just like education, mental health, a bunch of other huge issues that exist in the world. And the common trend that we've noticed in terms of what actually drives the most success actually comes as part of some of these core 5 principles and methodologies that come together. And if you actually do end up just naturally, you end up possibly from very different sources actually employing some of those different action items and portions over your life. But to gain the most results, and based on like conversations I had with industry professionals as well, that the most results actually come when you follow this order of CPACI, right? So let's just kick it off straight away in terms of what exactly it is, right? So the first step is clarify. And by clarify, I actually mean actually really getting in touch with what you want and sort of the end vision that you have for yourself, whether that be 5 months from now, 5 years from now, or even 50 years from now, right? And really getting in touch with like the whole concept and sort of the whole vision between what you want and what you're running away from, potentially. And then also beyond that would be the idea of having a really cohesive plan set out in terms of how you want to reach that end vision, right? So for example, say you want to become that next Elon Musk or that next future inspirational figure, right? What's the actual plan to get there? And once you have that plan in place, that's all good and handy, right? But then the next piece is actually acting on it. Because a lot of times we can sort of say that we have sort of this aspiration that we want to do something, or that we sort of have a plan that's set out there. But until we actually get on the ground and make things happen and actually invest in ourselves in terms of our time, resources, in terms of growing ourselves, only then can things truly change. And then the next piece of the puzzle beyond that would be connecting. And what I mean by that is, I'll actually explain further once I get to that part. But in terms of connecting, specifically on how you can actually leverage the core 3 pieces that came before it, and then also actually exponentially grow the trajectory of your own personal growth in terms of your projects, but also even potential future startup ideas and other projects that you might be sort of working on, and then also even linking that up with any career aspirations. And then beyond that, lastly would be iterate, right? And actually just fine-tuning the system that comes as part of the whole process and wrapping it all together in a nice cohesive bundle. So in terms of clarify, I actually want to start here because this is probably by far the most important aspect to get straight before anything else. And the reason is because, like the Disney saying goes, if you don't know where you're going, any path will take you there. And that quote actually really touches me because unless I've noticed that from personal experience that if I'm not actually inherently linked up with why I'm doing what I'm doing, I will simply be fumbling around and unmotivated and a bunch of different other emotions that have not served me, right? So the first piece in terms of how you can clarify is that there's this really popular technique called the Odyssey plan, right? So 5 years from now, essentially, there's going to be 3 different scenarios that you can sort of craft out and sort of draft upon. The first one would be the idea of what would your life in 5 years look like if you're continuing on your current trajectory? And the reason I say this is that you might have sort of this pre-existing, this is probably the easiest one actually to sort of complete, would be to say, okay, well, right now I'm continuing on like what I'm currently doing, whatever I'm just taking an action in from right now to what will actually translate to what the future 5 years will look like, right? But the second one is actually more difficult because it's the idea of what would 5 years look like in terms of your life if you took another alternate trajectory or path that you haven't really thought about. It's the idea of like actually opening up your mind to other different variety of options, right? And then beyond that, the last piece of that Odyssey plan is actually the idea of thinking about life in 5 years. If money or society factors were not a limitation. So for example, you weren't told what to do. You don't have to worry about money, and you don't have to worry about any of the other pre-existing pressures that come up with just actually existing and from other external factors, whether that be your peers, your parents, your friends, whatever it may be. Right. So sort of clarifying that and thinking through like what would those 3 scenarios look like? And then beyond that would be actually connecting with the why and what actually physically drives you. Like, what actually gets you out of bed in the morning and what gets you excited? I think when you actually have something that really pushes you forward, it will not really matter in terms of how much time you sort of spend. For example, if you're really excited about solving a specific problem, whether that be like world hunger or like poverty, like for example, it doesn't even have to be that big. Like if you want to build something that solves an inherent problem, I think that in itself, connecting that with clarifying your sort of reason as to why you get up and do things would be super powerful as well. And then the next piece is actually linking up with the aspect of what are you running away from? Because ever since the beginning of time, we as humans have been ingrained that we are always running away from something. Think about the prehistoric times, right? Where essentially the only two things that you're worried about is, okay, what do I have to eat right now? And how do I make sure that I don't get eaten, right? And that whole concept of actually trying to understand what you're running away from is actually really critical, because if you're running away from hard things right now, and if you're like not really clarified on what you're running away from, and you're not really intentional about how you're sort of approaching things on your day-to-day basis, it's going to be really hard to actually reach some of the other plans and some of the other visions that you have in mind. And then the aspect behind that is actually the idea of what does your ideal life look like? And if you continue on your current trajectory, like what would you be happy with the way that things turn out? Like think about if you're on your deathbed in 10 to 15 years from now, just like if you continue what you're doing right now, would you be satisfied? And would you say I lived a good life? And I think for a lot of people, from conversations I had, it's very likely that the answer is no, right? So what do we have to do to actually change that and actually change the actions that we're doing to make it so that the answer is this has been a good life and I've lived my life, right? And then the next step beyond that in terms of the Palymath method is actually the aspect of plan, right? And you can have like great visions, but like this quote says, a vision without a plan is just a hallucination. So in terms of the aspect behind actually getting the plan set in stone and in place and developing a really cohesive sort of guideline, is that the plan should actually ideally include goals, action items, and timeframes with habits built in. That way it becomes a very, very automatic feedback loop. So essentially it's breaking down into the three core terms. So short term, medium term, and then long term. So the core aspect and thing to think about is that you have to be really realistic when you're crafting some of these plans for the long haul. And actually this connects into the next aspect of making sure that you understand the delta between where you are right now and where you want to be. See, a lot of people, they say, okay, I want to be this, but that's okay. That's great and all. But understanding what you actually need to do to actually get there will set you apart from everyone else, like 99%, right? And then this actually brings into the next aspect of the action items. So once you understand what you need to do to get apart from everyone else and understand what you need to do to actually reach that future aspirational figure, is that you have to really identify the action items and then carve out the time, the resources, and energy towards actively pursuing what you want. Because if you can say that I have the priority of doing 3 top things, but if you don't actually end up doing some of those things, it's going to be really hard to actually achieve the results that you want. And then beyond that, it's the idea of the ideal time methodology, where life is actually broken down into a few blocks of main time, right? It's like days, weeks, and years, and months. But if you craft the ideal days, essentially you can think about the fact that if you live every single day to 100% satisfaction or near 100% satisfaction, at the end it'll compound into something that's really beautiful and something that you inherently enjoy doing, right? So that's the whole principle behind that. And then now, after you get that action item and sort of plan set in stone, it's the idea of actually carrying that and transitioning it into just doing things, right? Because you are what you say, you are what you do, and you're not what you say you do, right? So after you clarify things, it's actually just time to get to work, right? Like forget everything else, and the easiest part is now done. Like the plan clarification is great and all, but only until you actually do things, nothing will be set in stone. So keep that time between the thought and the actual action minimal. And then beyond that, it's the idea of procrastination, right? Like we inherently as humans are lazy, and it's just something that we are naturally attuned to. We seek dopamine, we seek sort of the enjoyment factor in life, right? But it's actually really important to try and actually maximize sort of this like intrinsic human structure. So to actually become the master of the world, you actually should be fighting against those inner demons. And I think the best ways that you can sort of approach that, even at the beginning when you maybe don't have as much discipline. I'm still building discipline myself, right? As the idea of like using different hacks, like the 5-second rule, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then just going and do things, or the Pomodoro techniques, or even just 80-20 rules and focusing on the most important things to make things happen, right? And that actually translates directly into the idea of mindset. because once you internalize a growth mindset and you sort of master your mind, you can end up showing the world and showing up to be the masters that sort of make change and influence things. So that means maybe doing hard things. That could mean being anti-fragile. And that means pushing past the dip and actually pursuing the things that just don't make sense right now in terms of it's really hard, but it is actually something that would align with your future. And the next thing would be aligning with your why. Because when all else fails, you want to make sure that you're connecting yourself with why you're doing it in the first place. Because if you have something that's really good in terms of your intrinsic vision and something that you want to attain, then it will inherently become easier to end up just doing the actions, even the hard things that would actually get you there. The next aspect would be connect, right? So the idea of like the fact that no one gets things done and achieves success alone is really important to internalize. No one, right? Build networks, because networks are extremely powerful. See, as cliche as it sounds, I know it sounds really, really cliche and like you've heard it a million times, but your network really does equal your net worth, right? So you can't do everything alone. Think about like the biggest companies for today. Like think about the biggest successful startups and a bunch of different ventures. Everything exists because people are able to come together and cohesively work together towards a common end vision. Beyond that, it's the idea that you should be making friends. And I know like this might seem like it's obvious and whatnot, but even during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's been much harder to engage with others because we as humans thrive on human connection, right? There's a saying that, and there's a reason that like solitary confinement is horrible for our own mental health. And for example, being stuck at home in lockdown has been really taxing on our own mental health as well, right? So essentially trying to connect with others and really be authentic is something that's really powerful because as the saying goes, like you're the average of your 5 closest friends. So just choose wisely, but also make sure that you're interacting with people. And then beyond that, it's the idea of asking questions, right? See, good questions and bad questions really don't matter. One will shed light and knowledge, but then the other one will actually end up creating a very valuable learning opportunity. So for example, even in panels or events where you're talking or listening to huge CEOs, startup founders, or people that are preaching to you, the idea that you might be afraid that you might be asking a dumb question, or the idea that you're sort of holding back because you have this intrinsic fear of what if I say something stupid, right? It's like I care about what other people think. But I think it's actually really, I challenge you to actually push beyond that and just try to ask a question. And even if that question turns out to be bad, it will actually teach you something really valuable. It will increase your ability to understand what's a good question and what's a bad question. All right. And then if you actually end up asking great questions, then A, you'll have made an excellent impression. And then also B, you've shed light on knowledge that was waiting to be tapped on, because questions actually unlock and serve as a key towards someone's brain, right? You essentially get to pick their brain. Okay. So then beyond that, the final piece of the puzzle in terms of connecting would be actually to provide value. There's so many times where essentially people are always thinking about what's in it for them, right? They always care about, okay, I have this to do, like I'm super busy, right? And like, why are you coming to me? Essentially, like every single person cares about what's in it for me in terms of anything that they're approached with, right? So by providing value and helping others, you're actually going to invoke a reciprocity effect, right? Essentially, people will naturally want to help you and give when they are actually receiving, right? When you're in a community that supports you, when you're among a group of friends, or when you're among a bunch of different people that sort of lift you up, it's going to be much, much easier to actually mutually benefit and mutually exchange value, right? And then lastly, the aspect of iteration. That's the final piece of the puzzle, because systems are powerful. And these 4 core action sort of methodology steps that I've previously outlined before would be great. But essentially, as time goes on, systems are powerful, but the rust sort of builds up sometimes, right? So essentially, all I'm asking is like, go clean the rust from time to time and scrape it off, right? So the first piece of that would be to eliminate the waste, right? We all do things that don't make sense. Oftentimes, we fall into the scarcity mindset. We take everything that comes our way. Oh, I see an opportunity here. I'm going to take it right away. Or I see something here. Someone's asking me to do something, or something's happening in my life that I just want to seize, because of the idea of that opportunities are limited or things are limited and like you only have one shot at things. The idea of actually creating an abundance mindset and also trying to open your mind towards being more accepting of the fact that you should be able to let things go when they don't serve you and cut down on things that don't really make sense to you, right? And then beyond that, it's the idea of reflection, right? Life can get super duper busy. Like I know I can speak from experience. Many of you can speak from experience where school gets really tough, times come up, where projects are crushing on you, where commitments, where different positions are really dragging you down. But it's still really important. Just take a few minutes, whether that's in the morning, afternoon, night, doesn't matter when. Just Literally just take a step back and then reflect on what's been happening for the last period of time since you last thought about things, right? And figure out like what went well, what went poorly, and the lessons that you've learned. Because only then you are able to extract data or knowledge or sort of past reflections and then use that to influence your future decisions, which might end up serving you a lot more. And then beyond that, it's the aspect of actually connecting that with potentially like aspects of productivity and ultra learning, right? And I think this one is something that to be really wary about, because only when you have the right puzzle pieces in place does productivity and ultra learning serve you, right? For example, if you're being productive on the wrong things, you're not being productive. Like if you're going against the opposite direction of what you really, really want to be reaching towards, then it really isn't going to matter. So only once you have the really clear picture on what you want, and then also the different action items, and you're clarified on what you should be doing, then productivity and ultra learning comes into play really effectively. And then the last piece of the puzzle in terms of the Sipaki method is the idea of self-maintenance, right? Like you have to take care of yourself, period. Like there's no doubt beyond that. If you're not feeling well, if you're down in the dumps, if your mental health is in the drain, it's absolutely gone, then there's no way you can impact people. There's no way you can work on the things that you care about or work on the things that sort of will actually inherently drive value for you in the future or even to the world, right? But make sure that you come first. Take care of yourself before you take care of others. And this actually connects directly with the idea of personal maintenance and personal well-being, right? You actually need to apply the idea of self-maintenance and personal sort of well-being before you can start seeing results, right? So I've created like a nice little acronym again, right? So idea of sleeping well, like you have to get the 7 to 8 hours as you need. I know hackathons like these are an exception where you end up just trying to have like a really short-term thing where you're trying to optimize for the best project, which is great, but actually on a regular basis, trying to think long-term and also optimize for sleeping the 7 to 9 hours that you need, right? Your body needs it. And there's a reason that we spend like 1/3 of our life just in our bed and just resting and taking care of ourselves, right? Beyond that, there's the idea of exercise. Exercise has been shown time and time again to boost your own mood, boost your own productivity, boost a bunch of different areas in your life. So just like maybe spend like 15 minutes going on a walk, or just like even the lightest form of exercise is the most helpful thing that's possible, right? And then beyond the next thing is like actually eat in terms of eating well, right? If we put junk in our body, there's no way that we're gonna feel good. We'll feel like junk. And I'm sure, like, for example, if you just like downed a whole bag of chips, you'll inherently just feel more bloated. You'll feel worse, and compared to if you just like ate something really healthy for you, right? So that's the whole mindset to have. And then beyond that, that's the idea of internet connection and also spending time with people that you care about, right? We all, again, thrive on human connection. So essentially trying to connect that piece of the puzzle and sort of serving ourselves and trying to treat ourselves well, and then also engaging with others will sort of lift our moods as well. And then the last piece is also nurturing ourselves and nurturing our own well-being. And within that, it's the idea of actually trying to do things that you enjoy outside of just working on just what you want to achieve. Because it's also important to have the balance, like have your hobbies and try to incorporate that in the puzzle. And then the last piece is grow, right? So for example, to actually start seeing results, you need to apply all of the things that we've talked about before in terms of Sipaki method and also the seeing method in terms of actually using that and leveraging those two together to create a superpower. So that's the whole mindset beyond that. Right. So I actually want to bring it back full circle right now and sort of ask you to like really think and apply that idea of reflection and start thinking, right? Like how have things been for the past little bit? Like what are some of the core things that you've already been doing? Because I know you all are super duper smart and you all are great people that have your own sort of visions and goals and whatnot. Because I know that by coming here, you care about your own personal growth and you care about getting really good at, particularly in the realm of hacking and just like design and whatnot, right? You have a bunch of different interests. So just like take maybe like even just 1 to 2 minutes and just sort of think about things and sort of think about potentially what things might look like and how you can directly take what I've just talked about here, so that your past 25 minutes hasn't gone to waste. So I'm just gonna give you like a solid like 1 to 2 minutes to sort of think about things. Awesome. Sounds good. Cool. I'm sure that you can continue this like sort of practice and sort of the mindset shift and also a bunch of different things in terms of what you can think about specifically on your own time. And if you'd like, you can also shoot me a message and I can send you some different templates your way as well. But let's actually move towards the call to action, right? And then we can hop up to a really quick Q&A session. I actually have 3 core asks. So like I want to think about and ask you sort of like how much do you really care about your own personal growth and development, and then how much did this session actually help? Like you can shoot me a message right after to my email and whatnot on what you actually had your core thoughts around, and if this session actually just made a change or a profound impact. Because that's like sort of the only intrinsic sort of action item that or success metric that I've been evaluating this on, right? So that's the whole premise. And then also, if you like the section, actually, I actually want you to provide feedback by actually just shooting me a direct message in terms of at hello@kevinliu.tech, right? And you'll see the email on the next screen. But then beyond that, as much as this session might have helped, action is still the final piece, right? So you actually need to sort of implement different things to make things happen. So in terms of actually getting this on the ground, you can visit my website once again at kevinliu.tech, and then you can see a sort of action guide on what you can directly employ. And then beyond that, let's stay in touch. And thank you so much for all being here. I will open up really quickly to wrap up with another few Q&As, but that have already been submitted, and then we can just jump straight into that. So someone just asked, how do you try not to stay? So how do you get distracted, and then how do you not get distracted? I always try studying, but I will remember something else, and then it's 8 p.m. and I haven't done anything. Yo, those are absolutely huge. So essentially, it's actually really, so our minds actually are built for having ideas, and like some of those ideas can be really serendipitous, right? Like they'll just like pop in. It's like, okay, what are trees? It's like the idea of like, for example, if you are getting some of those like intrusive thoughts, that's actually potentially a good thing, right? It's like your mind's functioning. You're just like innately curious, which is a good thing. So I think the best thing that you can actually employ directly in those situations, I think that worked for me, is that I would actually end up have this like really sick Notion set up online where I sort of like just like build different things into it, and I sort of capture my ideas, and I sort of make sure that I leave some. You can just like use a notebook or like leave just like a to-do list like sort of sheet, and just like write down different things that you've been thinking about, and then make sure that when you're actually sort of focusing on things, that you just don't get distracted and just like look it up after your session series like periods is done. Right. So just make sure that like you're staying focused on the thing at hand. Does asking questions in general make a connection? I hope that helped as well. But in terms of like, does asking questions actually generally make a connection, or do the questions have to be super good? I think like it actually really depends, right? For example, like in sessions where sometimes people aren't asking questions at all, like just asking one question, even if it's like mediocre in terms of like what you think, it could be something that like the speaker or person just like on panel really likes, right? So just as long as you're actually just voicing up intrinsically over time, you'll feel better, and you'll sort of like get a better intrinsic sort of intuition behind what questions are good, what questions are bad, and like how you can approach different things. And then also the next one would be, is writing considered to be helpful to reflect on experience? I think it is absolutely valuable. I actually end up doing like a nightly sort of journal routine where I essentially like look through my day and then go through some of the core things that actually happened, and then also like break down like how I react in different situations or whatnot, right? So reflecting and writing, even just like in times where you're experiencing like difficult times. I know like I've actually used journaling to get through a lot of my own personal struggles with my own mental health, but then also my own sort of different things that I'm working through. So that's something that you can also think about as well. I hope that helped as well. And then also another question is, how do you prevent burnout when you're valuing productivity? So the important thing is actually you're building in the ability for you to take care of yourself without burning out. And the thought process behind this is like, you want to optimize for productivity, yes. But if you're ending up just working 24/7 nonstop and everything else is going out the window, if you're not seeing, once again, you can like also look at the acronym once again. But it's like this like nice little mnemonic I came up with. But if you're not just like taking care of yourself, you will inherently burn out. And I've had times this year where I've burned out. And I think actually just getting back to those root fundamentals has been really, really helpful. So just trying to balance everything, and also like make sure that you're carving out focus time, but they're also like carving out time to like just like enjoy yourself, right? Like just live life, just like enjoy things. And then where can we get the Notion template? I actually really encourage, I'm making a Notion video dropping out this Sunday, I think actually, it's scheduled. So you can also check out myself on YouTube, search up Kevin Liu. Essentially, I can also send the link in the chat as well. But I can also share my Notion template if you directly email me at hello@kevinliu.tech with your just like thought process on how you thought this session went, and then also a bunch of different things from that. And then I know as well, if there's nothing else, I'm pretty sure I can wrap it up, because I know we're crowding directly on the time, on the dot. And then also, I do actually want to encourage you to fill out the feedback form, because I really want to know how you sort of ended up thinking about this sort of whole workshop, and if you enjoyed it and whatnot. So yeah, just like fill out and just prompt yourself on getting to this QR code scanner and then entering the passcode algebra and scanning it, and then filling out what your thoughts are for how this went. Thank you so much, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was great.